Hi, everybody. This is Ira Winkler, and I'm here with Robert Bigman, Bob, as we call him. And essentially, so obviously, I'm here to promote CruiseCon because this is going on the CruiseCon channel. But at the same time, that's a side issue because I was thinking, how do we promote CruiseCon? But we're also right in the middle of a war that's going on that heavily involves, well, kinetic, but my background at NSA, Bob's background at CIA, we kind of know that there's a lot of cyber, let's just say, hacking going on as well. So I wanted to talk to Bob and interview him because he's our keynote speaker at CruiseCon West, October 2nd through 6th, going out of the port of LA, or I guess whatever they call that port. And so with that in mind, Bob, would you like to talk a few words about your background, what you're doing now, so everybody knows why you're
Sure.
still the expert that you are?
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, so believe it or not, I'm now in my 41st year of cybersecurity. I'm sure most of the audience is not even 41 years old. So yeah, I've been doing cyber for a long time. I worked 30 years in the government at CIA, almost all of it doing defensive cybersecurity. I was a CISO there for 15 years. I also spent a few years in offensive cyber at the early days when we were mostly going after mainframe computers. That's a long time ago. I retired in 2012, and since then I've been working with governments, our government, foreign governments, multinationals, medium-sized companies of all different verticals, mostly financial, but also the industrial control sectors as well, on how to secure their systems and what things are really, really important to think about, and what things, frankly, despite what you hear in the training courses and accreditation frameworks, aren't frankly all that helpful. So, and there are a lot, by the way. So yeah, so I go into lots of clients. I do lots of assessments. A number of them I work with on a monthly basis to make sure there's certain issues and taking care of certain topics as they come up. This month so far has been big on AD security because attacks against both LDAP and AD. But every month it's probably a different theme.
Yep. So I guess with that in mind, and going with the current news stories, actually let's work to put this through. So you were on the defensive side over at the CIA for the most part, like you were saying. In this, so I'll break this up into defensive and offensive capability. So very briefly, when Israel obviously launched the attack proactively, it's under regular attack by Iran, like we mentioned before, before we started talking, Iran hacked a desalination plant and was trying to poison the water in Israel months before this.
Right.
But Israel, knowing that they were going to attack Iran from a defensive perspective, what would they have done to harden their resources to make sure that Iran wasn't able to strike back quickly and effectively?
So, not surprisingly, their number one tool is isolation. I know in the times I talked to them many times that the importance of absolute air gap based isolation, there's no substitute for. So obviously they keep their networks isolated from the internet or isolated from third parties. Obviously it's for their classified networks. They're also very good, in fact, much better than we are, at testing their programs. And I don't necessarily mean pen testing, although I think they do that too. But their incident response capability is second to none. As you mentioned, they've had some incidents. Even in their national security systems, they've had some incidents, frankly. But they're very well practiced and very well confident that they have the ability to recover quickly. Actually, maybe we're the only organization that practices resiliency. And that's not just from a hardware perspective, but it's from a software layer and from a data layer as well. So I was aware that before this event that they were doing a lot of exercises to test their cyber resiliency and security. Wasn't sure what that meant. I mean, they're always doing a lot of testing, and but clearly now I can put one and one together and figure out that okay, I see what they were doing.
So, with regard to proactive testing and things like that, of the resiliency, what when you talk resiliency, are you talking, for example, redundancy, which is part of resiliency, or are you talking rapid recovery? Are you talking rapid,
Yeah,
like what would be resiliency to you?
it's mostly redundancy for their critical national security systems and their intelligence databases. And we practice this too. I think not to the extent, frankly, that they do. They have basically redundant systems available that aren't always on, right? That aren't always activated, but they always make sure that they've got current software, current hardware, and they can, basically exchange both client and server capabilities within minutes. I remember how many discussions we had with them about hardware switches at one time. And I mean, it's like all we ever talked about. So they have, lots of redundancy in their systems, and their data is, they've got a large internal cloud computing capability. So they practice both physical and logical site isolation of their redundant systems. And as I said, most importantly, this is where I think we're not as good, is their testing.
Yeah.
They test them weekly.
Yeah, ironically, I currently work for CISO Security, and my CEO, he was in charge of the Matsoff group. I don't know how to pronounce section 21 and 25 that he founded, which is the red teaming and incident response team. So I'm glad to see I'm working for somebody who started something great otherwise. But anyway, Ruby's amazing. That aside, so I mean that's on the defensive side, and that's a lesson that I think U.S. companies can really take to heart, and like the U.S. government as well. What on the offensive side, we mentioned that is like Iran already tried to attack the desalination plant, and then at the same time, Israel, it's pretty much obviously Israel hacked Iran's largest crypto exchange to steal $90 million and probably also cripple the Republican Guard's ability to finance a lot of operations, which probably is not just important inside Iran, but also for supporting terrorists, let's just be diplomatic, potential terrorist operations outside of Iran.
Right.
So what else would Israel have tried to do proactively to cripple Iran to the extent they could from an electronic perspective?
Sure. So I would slice this into two layers. Number one is in support of their military objectives, of course, and they will attempt to, and I believe we're successful in accessing some of their Iran's defensive, both from a missile detection capability and a tracking capability, and in general access to their power sources. And they continually do that. The second layer is what I'd fall under cyber regime change. So the Israelis believe, I'm not so sure myself, but the Israelis believe that they can use cyber to help force regime change, because that is a goal, despite what you may be hearing. They do have a goal of regime change in Iran. And what they've been doing is a variety of things, some new, some old. Again, the electrical power grid, Isfahan, have been on and off. They had control at some point of the internet, of the Iran internal banking network. They're able to turn off cash machines and bank systems and make it difficult on the population to perform everyday tasks. gasoline stations, the electronic pumps and all that. And that's in support of their, function to force, this regime, the force the population to hopefully overthrow the regime. Levels, I think they slice the offensive cyber into.
So in other words, if I'm listening, there's some of it is obviously in support of military targets and military goals. And then at the same time, also, for lack of a better term, psyops to help facilitate the lack of trust in the underlying financial and power grid, because if the power is going on and off, obviously that impacts quality of life, it impacts certainty and things like that. And then not having gas means you can't rush out of the country too.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think the crypto hack kind of sits in both worlds. It limits the IGRC to their funds, and it makes the people feel less confident about their country, their governments secure themselves. And this is just this has been going on at least 10 years that I know of, where Israel's worked on both layers of their attacks. It's a critical part of their strategy. They don't go unless they know they've had the ability to do some certain controls. And as I said, it's mostly cyber operations. There's also electronics, electromagnetic offensive, which is a little cyber, but also a little bit electromagnetic.
So you're talking like EMP pulsing and things like that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they basically have these two layers of approach to using cyber as a weapon. Now, Iran's had some success, mostly mixed. The one that was most public, the one you mentioned, is the access to the desalination plant. It's not clear how much access they actually had, but they were able to, for at least a short period of time, do some configuration changes to the PLCs. They've also had some examples. There hasn't been a lot of public discussion over it, but I do recall they did have access to a couple of the Israeli banks at a couple of times, spoofing user accounts. And they've also run some successful attacks against Israeli soldiers. Been able to spoof, probably using man-in-the-middle capabilities, ongoing discussions, messaging that they were doing with various people in the Israeli government. So they're not without their weapons as well.
Yeah. Now, do you think that, and then we have to be just, because I think there's a time limit on whether it's LinkedIn or YouTube so I have to we only have a couple minutes. Just want to warn you, I'm not trying to cut you off, but but generally, do you think that they are trying to, for example, during the previous election, NSA theoretically sent messages to the Russian hackers who might interfere with the election, saying, we know who you are and don't do it? And do you think Israel right now is trying to target because I know a lot of the Israeli hackers and they are well protected at the moment. Is Israel trying to kinetically go after the Iranian hackers or just get them offline, you would think?
Yeah, it's all cyber. Yeah. I've never seen them go after cyber, offensive cyber people. The only ones I've ever seen do that are the Russians. I've never seen Israel specifically attack in a kinetic way any cyber operations other than targeting data centers.
Okay, that's somehow as a potential cyber operator, that's both comforting and interesting to know.
Yeah, I had heard also that they had actually attacked a data center that was in Iraq as part of this thing, because they were using that as a VPN forwarding capability. And that was one of the early victims last weekend, Friday.
Interesting. So anyway, just in like the minute I think we have, do
Sure.
you want to give us a quick preview of what you intend to talk about during your keynote at CruiseCon?
Certainly, thank you. So I've done well over 100 assessments, big
Hmm.
companies, government agencies, and you do 100, you learn some things. It takes me 100 to learn them, but you do pick, somewhere around 60, 70, you start picking up. So there's certain themes, right? That allow you to detect a good cybersecurity program from a really bad cybersecurity program. And there is some predictable ways both the program's managed and the technology they use and how they configure things. So what I want to do is leave the attendees with some understanding of what I found. And I found works in stopping hacking. And it's not necessarily what you, as I said earlier, what you suspect are the key things, right? There are
Hmm.
certain, configuration specifics in Microsoft's client server network that are still clearly important that nobody really, frankly, focuses on. I've
Hmm.
never a client that does some of the things properly. So I'm going to go over, kind of what works, and I'm going to spend a little time. Frankly, it's probably going to be somewhat controversial, but that's me, on things that don't work, and it really you should
Yeah.
not be spending a whole lot of time on.
Nah, I agree. I've always tried to focus people on good cyber hygiene, but that takes care of a lot of it.
Hmm.
But there's obviously some of these little fine points that you're going to be discussing that go well beyond, well, I wouldn't say well beyond hygiene, but things that should be included with the hygiene, I'm going to assume.
Yeah, it's things you didn't think of, probably never
Yeah.
thought.
It's like the little small things, like, I don't know,
I'll,
like every so often, when I do I'm doing an analogy here, but when I do a physical assessment, just for example, making sure that they don't prop open doors for smoke breaks at the back of buildings.
yeah, I'll give you a quick one. SMB signing. If I can
Hmm.
convince my clients just to sign their SMB sessions, right, they could cut out, at least 15, 20% of the hacking that goes on. It just happened last week. It just happened again last week. There was an SMB attack that was part of an LDAP
Yeah.
attack. And I'm thinking to myself, and I sent a note out to all my clients and said, listen, I've told you 1,000 times, you got to sign the damn thing. And they nod and, you know. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
little things like that. And they're not all technical either. A lot of them are, frankly, programmatic, right? How you run the program.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, we're probably at or above time,
Yeah.
but anyway,
Okay.
I just wanted to, well, we'll edit appropriately. But anyway, I just want to thank you for getting on this and looking forward to having you on CruiseCon West because, again, it's really the environment to get together. We had Admiral Rogers as our keynote at the last event, and it's the networking, getting, very few people were like, wait, I'm like talking to an admiral. And it's like now they'll be talking to like the CISO from the CIA. And I think that's as impressive in its own way. Uh,
Okay.
but anyway, no, I mean, it's frankly, let's just say you're much more operational hands-on than he would have
Yeah.
been.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, thanks for your time
Sure.
and looking forward to seeing you and everybody else on CruiseCon West.
Looking forward to seeing you all too.